Welcome back to Hiking Historian. I'm Lucas Berry. Today we recount the voyage of Titanic from her leaving Southampton all the way through the night she sank. So let's get started.
Titanic's maiden voyage was to be one very familiar to White Star Line vessels. She would leave Southampton at noon on Wednesday, April 10th, sail to Cherbourg, France, and arrive in the evening. Then she would sail to Queenstown, now Cobh, Ireland, and arrive on the morning of the 11th before heading out to open sea. The trip, though, did not get off to the best start. Just as Titanic had started to pull away from Southampton dock, there sounded like what appeared to be gunshots. No one knew what it was, so with some quick thinking on the bridge, Titanic stopped and delayed her departure by a half hour to assess the situation. What had happened was the moorings that were keeping other ships laid up had snapped due to the immense displacement caused by Titanic. In fact, Titanic also came close to colliding with one of these ships, the SS New York. Thankfully, a collision was avoided. The reason there were so many ships laid up in the harbor was because there was a coal miner strike that had just ended, and all these ships were coal-fired. No coal means no sailing. Titanic was able to sail due to an agreement between ships owned by the International Mercantile Marine Company, the same company that owned the White Star Line, that they would give Titanic their coal so she could make her voyage and she would also take their passengers, since Titanic was very much underbooked. That to me represents one of the most tragic things about the sinking of Titanic, that many of those on board who died should never have been on board to begin with. Once everything had been checked and deemed good to go, Titanic started off for Cherbourg. When Titanic arrived at Cherbourg, she did not go into the harbor itself. She simply had two tenders, the SS Nomadic and the SS Traffic, come out to meet her with passengers boarding at Cherbourg and took passengers that were disembarking. The process took about 90 minutes, and once it was completed, Titanic set off for Ireland. Fun fact here, the Nomadic is the only White Star Line ship still in existence today. She's currently a museum ship in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Titanic arrived in Queenstown at 11:30 the next morning and again had two tenders come out to greet her with any passengers who would be boarding and taking off anyone who was disembarking. One person who did leave, who really wasn't supposed to, was a crew member named John Coffey. He snuck himself ashore at Queenstown and in all likelihood saved his own life, although he had no way of knowing it at the time. Titanic weighed anchor at 1:30 p.m. and set off for open sea. No one knew at the time it would be the last time she would see land. The voyage at open sea passed without major incident until the big one. As she sailed, Titanic was alerted by other ships of ice in the area around Newfoundland. Titanic continued to steam at full speed, which was common practice of the time. What really is impressive about that was that starting out, Titanic did not have all 29 of her boilers lit, and was still doing her top speed of about 21 knots. There was even talk amongst passengers and crew that maybe, just maybe, they could arrive in New York a day early. Now let's clarify what that means before we move on. Voyages are not measured from dock to dock, or rather lightship to lightship. A lightship is basically a lighthouse on a ship just outside a harbor. Once you pass a lightship, that officially counts as the voyage starting, and likewise once you pass one at your destination, the voyage is officially over. Had Titanic reached a lightship in New York ahead of schedule, she simply would have dropped anchor and waited for her berth in New York Harbor to open up.
Ice warnings continued throughout the voyage, but again, Titanic sailed on. Captain Smith did order Titanic on a more southern route in an attempt to avoid the ice. Unfortunately, that move did not work. Join us tomorrow as we discuss the main event, the sinking of RMS Titanic. For the Hiking Historian, I'm Lucas Berry.